Victory for the day. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Clark. I'm the director of the National Water Center here in Tuscaloosa. It will be 10 years to the day on Friday that I packed up and left my home in Salt Lake City to come first to D.C., and then, shockingly, as a lifelong Westerner, somehow I ended up in Alabama. So one of the things I want to talk about today is that we are truly the nation's national water center. We're not the humid region. We're not the National Flood Center. We truly are an entity designed within NOAA to advance the comprehensive water resources prediction mission of the agency. And certainly, as this audience knows extremely well, the critical challenges of water availability, water supply predictions in the West, in addition to flooding, are vital to our nation's economy as well as the life and safety of our citizens. So this is our vision statement and our mission and functions. Essentially, if you talk to Dr. Cellini, the director of the National Weather Service, he talks a lot about making a weather-ready nation that's more resilient, responsive, and capable to respond to the challenge of weather, water, and climate extremes. And we take that a step further and we talk about becoming water. And what does that mean in the 21st century? It is really a context of providing spatial information, the temporal information, at the resolutions at which we need to make decisions. And this is reinforced through a series of stakeholder engagements that we began going back as far as 2011 and 2012, where we worked with river-based commissions across the country, from the Russian to the Susquehanna to the Hudson, in Delaware, and Ohio, portions of the Colorado Basin, to really talk about what the priorities were. And it's not surprising that it's not just flooding, but it's droughts, water availability, water quality issues. And all of these are undercut by the uncertainty associated with the changing climate. The other thing that our stakeholders reinforced was that they needed to have high-resolution street-level or neighborhood-level analysis. And they wanted the information to be available not just in projections at points in terms of volumetric water supply or flood stages, but information that they could embed in their decision support platforms, really bringing water into the geospatial realm and making sure that we have the ability to support the decision-making process for those that use our information, not from an end product, but from a continuum of based understanding of observations to analysis, predictions to guidance, and to the actual final forecast products, all of which is then further enabled by the Weather Service's approach to providing impact-based decision support services. And that extends to not just providing a forecast, a tornado warning, a flood warning, a water supply forecast, but working with a partner, working with a stakeholder to really understand the decisions that they are making alongside these critical pieces of information. If you look at our strategic plan for water, section 1.8 of this document, these are the bold priorities, 19 through 22. Deliver actionable water resources information at the street level at the neighborhood scales. That is our commitment to water resources data services. Provide minutes to months river forecasts to quantify both the atmospheric and hydrologic uncertainty. This is the efforts with our hydrologic ensemble forecast service and the evolution of our ensemble stream flow prediction for not just flooding and water supply applications, but for critical reservoir operations, as we're demonstrating with the successful forecast-informed reservoir operations activities both in California and that we have recently expanded with our partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation to portions of Oregon and Montana. And we'll continue to see successes there, I'm very sure. One point on HEFS is that we are in the process of upgrading the base model from the forcing with the Global Ensemble Forecast Service version 10 to version 12. So nearly a decade's improvement of work has gone into the evolution of the Global Ensemble Forecast system, and that will be reflected here as we recalibrate the HEFS basins across the country. We're working to improve our forecast of total water predictions in the coastal zone, and this means that we're partnering with the National Ocean Service. In fact, I just got off a call with Admiral Gallaudet, our NOAA leadership, on this topic and how we are going to integrate the freshwater capabilities along the coastal periphery so that we have comprehensive coverage for water surface elevation first, and eventually other variables like water quality in terms of temperature and salinity, would provide the total effects of water on the land surface as well as storm surge, tide, and landfalling systems wave runout. And finally, we are endeavoring to develop and provide flood inundation, real-time forecast flood inundation maps to further complement the official forecast from the river forecast centers, as well as the guidance from the National Water Model. And I'll talk a little bit to that here in a little bit. The National Water Center is a 65,000 square foot building. We're located on the campus of the University of Alabama here in Tuscaloosa. In addition to these core capabilities, what we have seen over the 5 years that we have been open, cut the ribbon on May 26, 2015, has been really a flurry of activity ever since, is that we've become a center point for coordination and integration with the federal agencies. We've hosted a number of scientific meetings. Every year we bring in students from across the country through our partnership with the National Science Foundation and the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Sciences Incorporated. That's a mouthful of an acronym. To bring in graduate and postgraduate students to work on topics of mutual interest to the NOAA and to the other federal partners. U.S. Geological Survey supports us, as does the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Homeland Security, in providing access to some of their thought leaders and experts to act as mentors and guides to the students who are working with academic leads from universities across the country. It's been a really fruitful opportunity for us to get the best and the brightest from the academic community working alongside us here in the public sector. One of the things I'll point out here is that late last year, working through the Subcommittee on Disaster Reduction and with our partners at the Army Corps of Engineers and U.S. Geological Survey in concert with FEMA, we have agreed that the National Water Center will serve as a catalyst, as a focal point for the integration of flood inundation mapping techniques from these three agencies, providing a consistent federal voice for that critical information. Our other flagship capability, in addition to the Hydrologic Ensemble Forecast Service, is expanding our forecasting prediction capabilities from the 3,600 gauges that we forecast today from the river forecast centers to providing complementary guidance to 2.7 million reaches. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to expand the predictions of water surface elevations and channels, as well as volumes, from over 110,000 river miles to over 5 million miles of rivers across the country, putting that notion of a street level or a neighborhood level scale representation of the hydrologic processes and the predictions, the forecast thereof, into the hands of those that are making those very local decisions. And this is done in a partnership with both the National Centers for Atmospheric Research, Boulder, Colorado, as well as our strong relationship with the National Science Foundation, and again, Quasi. We first launched the National Water Model in 2016. We have been upgrading ever since. Version 1.1 and 1.2 most notably had improvements to underlying physical processes. One point there of interest to the Western audience is that we've enabled the capability to rapidly adjust parameters. So this is applicable for post-wildfire burn scars, where we need to adjust the hydrologic response of basins that have been recently burned. In version 2.0, we expanded the water model from a continental model to a truly national model by expanding to the Hawaiian island domain, providing the first ever hydrologic forecast, operational hydrologic forecast for the islands. And in version 2.1, we are again expanding to Puerto Rico, to the full contributing area of the Laurentian Basin, the Great Lakes region, improved reservoir modeling and physics, and improving the forcings, particularly the rainfall estimations for the Hawaiian Islands. And finally, in version 3.0 that we envision after the moratorium is lifted on our operational supercomputer, this will be extend the National Water Model to the Hawaiian domain, portions of the Cook Inlet and Copper River basins. We'll have improved infiltration scheme, better representation of shallow groundwater processes for gaining and losing reaches, particularly in the western U.S., inland hydraulic routing capability, and for the first time we'll be operationalizing that coastal coupling capability, providing comprehensive estimates of water surface elevations from freshwater and saltwater processes in our coastal periphery, expanding hydrologic and water resources forecast to the 130 some odd million people that live in our nation's coastal periphery. The other capability that we're working on is linking this to forecast inundation maps, and this technique leverages a technique that was developed and then really demonstrated during the Summer Institute of 2016 and 17, the height above nearest drainage approximation, This is not an engineering-grade H&H model, but it does allow us a first cut at where the water is and where it isn't. And again, it expands our ability to provide flood forecast information, inundation information, and depth to regions where we have not been able to do that with the fully robust H&H models that are deployed in about 180 gauge locations across the country. As I said, this is linked to 5 million miles of guidance from the National Water Model and 110,000 miles of the official river forecast information from our river forecast centers. This was done first as an agency priority goal in 2018 and 19, and we were asked by the Department of Commerce to continue this in 20 and 21 and expand this to the northeastern domain as well as the 110,000 miles of RFC forecast below their Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service points. That information is available online to our partners at the Weather Forecast and River Forecast Centers and is being deployed as we speak. And finally, I apologize for the clickiness of the slide. This is a contribution from our colleague Andy Wood at NCAR. We are also looking to expand the National Water Model's temporal reach to go to the water supply year by developing a technique that leverages a coarser discretization of the model to the approximate Hook 12 watershed level and allows us to provide a forcing that mimics the techniques used in the ensemble stream flow prediction. So again, while the water model today only goes out 30 days, we recognize the requirement to make sure that this is truly a water sources model as well as a short-term water prediction model. And by doing so, we believe that we can expand this to have a higher fidelity of water supply information available. Again, the ensemble-based information coming from the river forecast centers will remain the official forecast. But for basins where we don't have the historical information necessary to calibrate the model, we believe that this approximate method will also kind of fill in the gaps. So those are the activities that we are undertaking here at the National Water Center and across the Office of Water Prediction. I understand that we'll take questions towards the end of this conversation. Just want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon and look forward to the conversation. With that, I will pass it back to you, Deb, or you can take control back from me.
Thanks, Ed. Now I'm going to pass this over to Viva again.
Great.
Okay. Oh, it's on its way. Okay, you should have presenter abilities.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and load this up. Do you see my screen there?
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay, let me just start. Okay, great. Thank you again, Deb and Tony, for your patience with my technical difficulties earlier, and thanks, Ed, for pivoting so willingly. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Viva DeHaza, and a little bit of a change in my title. I'm actually the Executive Director for the National Integrated Drought Information System, which is essentially NOAA's drought program. And I appreciate the invitation to come in and share some of the things that NIDIS is currently working on. I'm going to give folks on the call, I recognize several of the names, but there were some that I didn't recognize, so there might be some new folks to NIDIS. So I'll do a little bit of an overview of NIDIS for a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about the reauthorization of NIDIS back in 2019. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the discussions that came out of the National Drought Forum, which was not quite, but almost a year ago in DC. And then talk about some of the giving you all some updates on the activities that NIDIS is working on at the national level. So just to familiarize everybody with what the mission and activities of NIDIS are. What is this thing called the National Integrated Drought Information System? I won't go through all of these icons, but it's to give you a sense of the breadth and the scope of the program. Many folks get us confused with a couple of key things. One is, if you're an early warning system, then NIDIS must be a forecast or prediction. It is that, but it's more, as you can tell from these icons. Okay, NIDIS, you must be the U.S. Drought Monitor. We definitely support and contribute to the U.S. Drought Monitor, but we are not just the U.S. Drought Monitor. Back in January 7th, 2019, the program was reauthorized for the second time. So we were originally authorized in 2006, and then for the second time we were reauthorized at the beginning of 2019 during the federal government shutdown. And with each authorization, Congress makes some minor tweaks and changes to our reauthorization and our public law language to make us and to maintain our relevance within the topic and the area of drought across the country. And there was no difference with this particular reauthorization. We not only received some additional, authorized to receive some additional dollars, but more importantly, we were asked to focus on some key areas. And I won't read it word for word, but they included things like more involvement and partnership with the private sector, supporting more research and activity around subseasonal to seasonal forecast improvements, as well as low flow water prediction. And you saw a slide that Ed had shown earlier on that mentioned drought. And then finally, we were directed to develop a strategy for a national coordinated soil moisture monitoring network. What would it take to build such a network? Again, to refresh folks' memory, the way that NIDIS is implemented in real life is through a series of regional drought early warning systems. So while we're charged to develop a national drought early warning system, we've approached this task by developing regional systems. And each of those systems has elements and activities and partnerships that are focused on these 5 core areas. Currently, this is our portfolio of those regional systems. I'm going to make a couple of comments at this point. First of all, this year we are actually going to be merging the 2 systems that are in the Southeast region, and they will become part of a larger Southeast regional drought early warning system, which will encompass the full states of those 2 smaller regions, as well as the state of Virginia. Not a lot of impact for this group of people on the call, but nonetheless, NIDIS is definitely growing. And then it's also, I wanted to raise or let everybody know that we've gotten a lot of requests from the state of Hawaii and the state of Alaska to launch drought early warning systems in those states. And at this time, we don't quite have the bandwidth to do it programmatically, so we're approaching it a little bit more slowly, and we are actually partnering with both states and representatives within those regions to do some work around drought early warning and drought preparedness. Again, as a reminder, back in July of last year, we convened the second National Drought Forum. We brought about 150 folks together in Washington, D.C. to have a dialogue around drought preparedness, but more importantly, what it would take to achieve drought resilience across the country. Here are some of the kind of more poignant outcomes that came out of that 2-day discussion, which included everybody from federal agency representatives all the way to actual just citizens, just average citizens in the community. Obviously, some of these outcomes should come as no surprise to many of you on this call. These are things that have been discussed in the recent past that need to have some additional attention paid to them. But some of the things that did come out that were interesting was how to engage the private sector more around risk assessment for drought, but also how to engage the insurance and the reinsurance industry. And with that came a pretty robust discussion about the need to not only catalog and collect impact information, but to actually quantify and monetize that impact information. That way we could provide better information to the insurance and reinsurance industry. Now, the next few slides, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on some of the key national efforts that we are focusing on. I say national because while we are engaged at these regional levels, as you would expect, we are starting to see some common themes that are coming out of all of the regions. And we have elevated some of those priorities that are showing up in these distinct regions to more of a national approach. And they include the topics that you see before you in this slide. And I'm going to take these topics one at a time just to give you a little bit of a taste of what we're working on. In the drought and public health arena, we have learned that many of the regions are struggling with better understanding the connections between drought and human health. And they're not just those common connections that you think of, like drought can sometimes exacerbate a wildfire season, and wildfire can add to high particulate matter in the air and therefore causing respiratory issues. There's more than just those health impacts. We're seeing impacts resulting from drought in waterborne vector diseases that are more prevalent, and other forms of human health impacts, including those associated with mental health impacts. And so we launched a summit about a year ago in Atlanta, Georgia, and convened a cadre of public health experts around the country to start talking about how to craft a strategy that NIDIS would work on for the next 5 years that would really shepherd our investments and our research priorities around drought and human health. And this is actually coming up even now in the face of the pandemic that we're facing. We continue to work on our 5-year strategy that we began in 2018. Similar to the public health and drought strategy, we have a wildland fire and drought strategy that we created in consultation with experts, wildland fire managers, and federal agency partners. And this 5-year strategy continues to guide our investments in the research realm, as well as our investments in developing products and services that help wildland fire managers respond and prepare for wildland fire as a result of drought conditions. We are also, I mentioned to you before, it's not just important to collect drought impact information. We've got to take it the next step further and really start to assess those impacts and assign dollar values to those impacts. NOAA has this fantastic resource that is updated every year. It's the NOAA's $1 billion disaster report. And we can see from that disaster report that drought is starting to inch its way up in the top 10 billion-dollar disasters. But what many folks don't know is that when it comes to drought, those impacts on the report are largely being driven by impacts to the agricultural economy. And so impacts that are felt by water utilities, municipalities, the rec and tourism sector, which is the second largest economic driver in much of the West, those impacts are not part of that $1 billion disaster. So we can only assume that if you were to add them, they could probably overtake some of those drought events could overtake some of the biggest hurricane and tornado events as well. So we are miring ourselves in a lot of work around impact assessment, and we have a project currently going on right now in the Four Corners region of the Southwest. In their recent droughts they experienced a couple of years ago, we are working with each of the states, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona, to look at the impacts that they sustained during that event and to try to quantify those impacts. This last year, were able to wrap up 2 complementary research studies. One was a drought impact assessment of the Northern Plains drought, and another was a complementary project that we work with the NOAA laboratory in Boulder, the Physical Sciences Laboratory, specifically to try to determine what were the leading causes of that Northern Plains flash drought. And so those 2 documents are out and available to the public online on drought.gov. I want to remind you again that part of our reauthorization language called for us to develop a strategy for a national coordinated soil moisture monitoring network. I'm thinking that perhaps the speaker after me, Mike Strobel, my colleague, will mention maybe some of this, but I just wanted folks to know that in the year since our reauthorization, we have worked across the federal family, and below you will see some of the logos. They don't even come close to representing the 200 plus subject matter experts that contributed not only in authoring chapters to this strategy, but providing their expertise to the strategy and how we developed it. The strategy in its draft form has been completed, and it is currently making its way through the NOAA clearance process. But it addresses everything from the state of the current networks that we have, and where there are opportunities to start to coordinate them. A big part of this strategy, and I want to say a big thank you to those of you on this call who have state mesonettes. The state mesonettes were very active participants in the development of this strategy. Your states have some of the best and most robust soil moisture monitoring networks out there, with some of the best equipment and at the highest levels of innovation. And so we're looking at ways to integrate that state data as well as the federal agency data that's being collected by agencies such as USDA, NASA, USGS, NOAA, and others, to really try to integrate this data and really start to use the raw data that we're getting from these sites to develop the next generation gridded soil moisture products that folks in the states need to manage the water resources, including folks that are managing water reservoir levels for flood and for water supply. That soil moisture data is critical. And it's not just critical, as you all know, for drought, it's also critical for the flood side as well. So we hope to have the strategy up on drought.gov, hopefully within the next few months. With COVID-19, it might slow down a little bit of the clearance process, but I hope to have something available for folks to take a look at within the next few months. Final two slides, I just wanted to mention that NIDIS ran a competitive research grant competition this year, and I'm happy to say that we took a lot of the advice and recommendations and requests from the states and from our partners in the regions to focus this competition specifically on research around drought indicators and drought triggers. So the competition has finished. We will be announcing the winners of that competition. We have, I think, 6 or 7 fantastic projects that are going to be looking at drought indicator research, drought trigger information research, around a multitude of economic sectors around the country. So really excited to share that information. Again, that will be available as well on drought.gov, hopefully within the next month or so. And then finally, we are in the process of doing a complete redesign of drought.gov that we would love to invite you to come and visit. We hope to have it launched and ready for prime time sometime around September. We're doing some of the final user testing. This site, unlike the past drought.gov versions of the drought.gov site, is undergoing some significant user testing, not just with members of your states and partners within the states, but also with partners within the big industries that drive our economy in this country. So more to come. But I'm really excited to be able to show you a very new way of accessing data and products and resources for real-time decision-making. So take a look. We'll definitely keep Tony and Western States Water Council abreast of the launch date as we start to get closer to it. And with that, thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Viva. Okay, let's see if I can send this over to Mike Strobel.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Mike.
Great. I've got kicked out twice already, so hopefully I'll get kicked out this time. Internet is always 50 out here.
Okay.
Let's see here. Share content. Okay. So are you able to see that?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
Oh, here it comes.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. So, okay, so it looks like we got everything. Okay, so I was asked to give a little bit of an update on the National Water and Climate Center. This was there's a number of issues here within our within the NRCS National Water and Climate Center that was of interest to the Western States Water Council, to the Western governors, and to other agencies that work with us. Two of the main issues that we dealt with over the last few years, we dealt with staffing, but also dealt with our IT capabilities. And so I'm going to give a bit of an update on where we're at with some of these things and move on from there. First thing I want to mention is that we do have now a new program manager, individual, Dr. Brent Duncan, who just came on a few weeks ago. He is also from within NRCS, but is new to the Snow Survey program. And he has a good background because he comes from the National Geospatial Center, so he's got a good GIS background. And this position, this program manager position, has been vacant since 2010. So it's really, 10 years. So it's nice having somebody there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Snow Survey program and the water supply forecasting. A little bit about the budget and the outlook, as well as the two issues that I mentioned, the staffing issues, the IT issues. Our plans right now for moving forward this summer. And then, as Viva had mentioned, I'll talk about SCAN as it fits in with the National Soil Moisture Network, and then conclude with that, and I guess we'll address questions following this. Just a little bit of background on the Snow Survey program, Snow Survey and Water Supply Forecasting program. It's in the Western U.S., we cover the 12 Western states and Alaska, and it's a pretty intense network where we have automated stations we call SNOTEL stations, which transmit information in near real time, so 24/7. That measures a number of parameters, including snow depth, snow water equivalent, and climatic parameters such as temperature, relative humidity, and other factors, precipitation. We have 873 of these across the Western U.S., and these are the high elevation networks, so we're kind of unique in that area where we collect high elevation information. And with that, about half of them have soil moisture and soil temperature. We also have snow light stations, 42 of these automated stations that transmit information. They have everything, but they don't have the large snow pillows. You see the picture there. You can see a snow pillow. The snow lights do not have those, but they have all the other information, as well as automated. We have 5 automated hydromet stations that collect precip information and transmit it. But sort of the background of the Snow Survey program has always been the snow courses. These are the mountain courses we have in the mountains where individuals will go up and make measurements once a month, as well as aerial markers, which will fly by either by fixed wing or helicopter and collect information there. And working with other groups such as British Columbia, as part of the Columbia Basin, we have about 1,253 of these snow courses that we're presently measuring. And then we also have manual precipitations stations as well that we go out and collect the information. Again, not telemetry, but in real time. We'll collect the information when we go out to those sites, so that's manual, just like the snow courses. Just in 2019, we had over 600 stream flow stations that we had water supply forecasts delivered for. 6,700 published water supply forecasts coming out of our center. Automated models that take the SNOTEL information and put out track the daily forecast trends at 322 points. And this is really well used information in the Western U.S., as you can imagine. For a number of things, obviously for hydroelectric power generation, those that are managing reservoirs, aquatic habitat, and recreation, and many other sources of information that really access this. We have, over the course of a year, we have 5.5 million unique page views and over almost 1 million customers reached. So a very large set of users for the information that we provide. So the status of the Snow Survey program, I guess what makes it kind of unique is that we're a pretty small program, considering what we do. The program has been funded the last few years at roughly $9.4 million, and most of that money goes out to the states. So we cover, as I mentioned, the 12 Western states, including Alaska, and that money mostly goes out to those states to do the Snow Survey program, to collect the information and to do maintenance on the SNOTEL sites. Really the field part of our program. A small part of it goes to the Water and Climate Center for providing this. Viva mentioned a little bit about COVID-19, and that's where we're kind of concerned about what's going to happen right now with the dollars this year, and we're kind of refocusing on the how we're using these dollars. And that's because some of the manual snow survey measurements were not made this winter. We couldn't get people in the field for different reasons of transportation and field work. So we were limited on some of the manual snow course measurements. And then we're also been delayed now getting out to do some of the summer field maintenance because of some of the rules and regulations that we've been following, although those are changing, and I'll talk a little bit about that here a little bit later. Presently, in the President's budget for 21, we have 11 million, so we have an increase this coming year planned in the President's budget, but as we know, we'll have to wait and see what happens as it moves through Congress and see what happens, as well as the other dollars that are going out to so many other areas that that are related to the efforts with COVID-19. So there's some uncertainty here, as you can imagine, but that is what we're hoping for at this point in the President's budget is planned for. Our main focus with the dollars we presently have, as well as the hopefully increase in the dollars, is first and foremost is upgrading the telemetry. We have a system, and many of you are familiar with this, the Meteor Burst system, which is a unique radio frequency system that transmits from our telemetry stations using radio frequencies that bounce off the atmosphere and come down to master stations. We've been using this since the late 1970s, and it's a very robust system, but the trouble is it's not a commercial system. There's no support for it. We've been doing this internally within our own agency, operating the master stations, developing the technology, making improvements, doing a lot of R&D ourselves, and as you can imagine, it's very effort intensive. And so we've been looking for ways to move away from Meteor Burst, and there's two areas that we're investing in. One is in satellite telemetry, and that is both the GOES system as well as other satellite telemetry, such as the Iridium satellite system, and cellular technology. The difficulty, for those of us that live in the West, we know this, the difficulty is that there's very limited coverage with cellular phone systems. And so it's working at about a little bit over half of our stations right now have potential for cell coverage. We're getting there. We're transferring a lot of the Meteor Burst over to cellular coverage where it is capable. And that coverage is increasing each year. And so we're looking at trying to convert all of our stations over the next 10 years to either satellite or cellular, and in fact move away then from Meteor Burst entirely. The other area we want to invest in is the expansion of the SNOTEL network. As I showed you earlier, we have a lot of snow courses, and there's a lot of locations where it'd be great to have real-time information. And so we've been looking at expanding the SNOTEL network. But the limitations there are two. One is on the dollar factor, and the other is on the personnel factor, having the people to actually not only install those stations, but to maintain those stations. And so those have been the limiting factor that we've had on that. We've had some growth over the last 5 to 10 years in the SNOTEL network, but not what we would like. We'd like to see a greater expansion of that, and hopefully if we have an increase in the budget and staffing, we can manage that. Just to give you an idea of the National Water and Climate Center, and because we were asking about staffing, this shows you the org chart. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a small program, but a very critical program. And what's interesting is only 19 individuals at the Water and Climate Center itself, and this is where all of our water supply forecasting comes out of. This is where all of our R&D comes out of. We have an electronic maintenance facility that does the calibration and repairs on all the instrumentation. And the map to the lower right there shows you just a number of SNOTEL, SCAN, and snow course stations that we have that really require the efforts of all these individuals. Just a couple years ago, actually just last year, if we were looking at the staffing chart, I would say that over half of these positions that are shown were vacant. So out of the 19, we were down at one point to about 8 people. And now we're back up to almost entirely staffed. In fact, the 3 that are in yellow are presently being advertised either right now or will be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I look to have a full staff again by sometime in mid-June. So that is very good news. And that was something that I know that many other agencies that work with us, as well as the Western governors, were concerned about seeing the staffing levels get back up again, and this has been a success for us. The other area that we're working heavily in is IT efforts. There's so much of our system that needed to be upgraded. We call the system WCIS, which is the Water and Climate Information System. And so this is some of the main areas that we're focusing on right now, working within our agency's IT system to upgrade a lot of the things that we have. The first is the data aggregation. We're looking at improvement in the tools for bringing in all this different telemetry data. It comes in from the different SNOTEL and scan stations. As you can imagine, using different systems such as meteor burst, cellular, satellite, we have data coming in from all across the western U.S., but in many different forms. And so we need to have a tool that actually brings this in so that it comes into our databases and we can work with it. The second is the auto validation. So one of the things too, we want to have an automated system that looks at the information coming in and looks for things that are outliers, looks for things that potentially are incorrect data and catches that so that we can improve the data quality. First of all, using this automated system, and then secondly, on the next one down, a data quality editing system so that we can visualize graphically and other ways to looking at the editing and visualization and improvement of our data for both SNOTEL and SCAN. So this will improve the processes and hopefully increase the quality of the information that we're putting out there. The one thing that we needed to update is our forecasting model environment. The one we use now is called Viper, and it's a statistical-based approach for forecasting that we do for water supply forecasting. And in reality, it's based in, it's actually an Excel spreadsheet-based system. We're looking at upgrading this forecasting to renovate the user interfaces and really to improve the kind of information that we deliver to our customers. So this is an upgrade that we'll be working on over the next year. And then also how we provide information, improvements in our data delivery. So we're looking at our enterprise content management and how we provide information through web services and getting information out to the public and to the other federal and state agencies that utilizes information, both tabular and graphic information that we're going to provide. So we're looking at different ways of doing that as well. And then the last thing is, any federal agency that works with climate information is also doing something similar where we're updating our normals. The 30-year averages, normals that we work with have to be upgraded for the 1991 to 2020 30-year period. And so that's something that we're also working on at the present time. So our field operations schedule for the summer is a little bit some uncertainty here, and I think it's all relates back to the COVID-19 and what we're allowed to do. There have been restrictions on travel, both out of state, overnight, as well as how many people per vehicle. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been put in place because of the safety of our employees, and that is first and foremost anyways. But we've recently got some waivers on that, so now that we can do out-of-state travel, we can stay overnight at places where we feel confident that the hotels have been going through the right sanitation processes, and we can travel 2 per vehicle now with certain safety regulations in place. There are concerns by some of our staff because of vulnerabilities. I mean, there are folks that are of higher risk than others, and so we're working with that on the individual staff themselves. In the agency, and I suppose all agencies are going through this, we get upgrades daily on where we're at with reopening and moving forward following COVID-19. As things start to loosen up and open up in many of the states, we see that each state has sort of their own different regulations and rules on this. And the agency has a 3-phase approach that we're working with right now too. So we're hoping to see that over time that things, as this settles down, becomes more opened up and we can get back to getting all the field work done that we need to get done. That said, the plans are varying between offices. And as I mentioned, because of the states and because of the phased approach, how we're going to approach the summer maintenance schedule is something that we're working with each of the individual offices on, and something that it's a dynamic situation where we're trying to adjust as we go, because this is something new for all of us. We're all learning as we go and trying to make the appropriate restrictions as well as changes as we move forward, and keeping precautions in place to ensure that the employees and the public are safe during this time. You even mentioned about the National Soil Moisture Network, and SCAN, or the Soil Climate Analysis Network through NRCS, is a very big piece of that. We have 223 stations across the U.S. as well as stations in Puerto Rico and in the Virgin Islands. And SCAN is something that we've been trying to invest in to increase its capabilities as it fits into the National Soil Moisture Network. So we held a workshop in January in Washington, D.C. with a focus on SCAN, but really brought in a lot of speakers to talk about the National Soil Moisture Network and how we can really beef up these systems to meet the requirements, the needs that we have when it comes to drought mitigation and other purposes. So we've been focusing a lot on the SCAN itself and looking at what we can do within our own agency. One of the things that we've done is we're bringing on 2 detailees that are going to work entirely on just planning out the strategy and the field maintenance coordination. Because one of the things we want to do is to work with the Soil Survey Division on really improving the field maintenance of all of our stations. We have folks with the Soil Survey Division that are across the U.S. We have them pretty much in every state and most counties, and so we have individuals that can, once trained, can really assist us in doing this. But one of the problems with this is that because so much of our information is technical, it's not something you can just contract out to individuals and have them go out to do. So we needed to develop our own processes to make sure that if we do utilize both the folks within NRCS as well as maybe contract assistance from outside the NRCS, that we had the proper documentation so they know in the field how to operate. And so we've updated 2 of our manuals. One is an installation manual, and another is a maintenance manual. And on both of these, it's really kind of a step-by-step process on installing and maintaining a SCAN station. This way it gives capabilities to the states, gives capabilities to other NRCS offices in the states across the U.S., and is a way for us to expand a network that has all the same specifications when it comes to sensors, depths of the soil moisture, soil temperature, and the way we collect the information and transmit that information. And one of the things, too, that we're investing in is on the data quality and database management. All this information comes into the National Water and Climate Center, and we really have to be able to utilize all the data quality tools that I mentioned earlier, as well as individuals that we've recently hired to ensure that the data quality is of the highest standards. And so really reviewing this on a daily basis. And so this is an area that we're investing in heavily, and an area that we want to see improvements on to make sure that our network is of the highest quality. And the last thing I'll mention on that is that we do have another set of another network called Tribal Scan, which isn't part of the SCAN network itself, but it follows the same format when it comes to the station instrumentation. And Tribal Scan is something we worked with BIA on, and it's kind of nice because this is a STEM process where we're using this as an educational tool, where they get trained on how to install a site, and they install their own site. We will help them on purchasing. We will help them with as a technical resource, but they'll install the site and they will maintain the site as well as collect the data, and it'll come through our web services, but they utilize the data then for really expanding as an educational tool within each of their tribal lands. And so it's a really nice break off from SCAN that has a lot of good utility. And I'll stop it there, and as I think all 3 of us will be open for questions and discussion as we'd like. So Dabo, back to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, that brings us to the conclusions of our webinar, and now we're transitioning over to questions. You have 2 options. You can use the chat, or you can unmute your mic and ask a question.
Deb, this is Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Maybe a question for all three, and that's
Okay.
soil moisture network. And Mike, I participated in that workshop in January, talking about potentials and possibilities, and then Viva with the reauthorization. NIDIS has some specific direction on a national soil moisture monitoring network. And then, Ed, I see that that is also a factor that you are including in the national water model. Can you all maybe comment on the partnership and how you're working together and bringing others to make this a reality?
I can, this is Viva, I'll take a stab at answering from my perspective. We are, I don't know if it's me, I don't think it's me. Anyway, I can hear an echo a little bit. I'll just quickly say that obviously it goes without saying that USDA has been a big partner in developing the strategy document. That SCAN meeting back in January that we were all at in DC, I agree with Mike, was more than just SCAN. It was a meeting about the National Soil Moisture Network. And what made it really powerful was that the Corps of Engineers, I'm not sure where they are in rotation to providing this type of webinar. They are currently working on a big project in the Upper Missouri River Basin. You could consider it somewhat of a pilot, like it's kind of a mini coordinated soil moisture monitoring network. The Corps is getting ready to install, I think, over 300 new climate and weather stations in that region, and they're going to be outfitted with state-of-the-art soil moisture sensors to measure that and to monitor soil moisture. And so part of the discussion has been, and I believe that the Corps has now additional requests from other regions of the country to provide similar activities, similar resources. But if the Corps is going to start to make investments like this in other parts of the country, then it's imperative that we figure out a way to integrate these new sites that are coming online. And some of the questions that are being bantered around are, do these new sites get ingested into the SCAN network? Do these new sites get ingested by the state mesonettes themselves? And then the mesonettes, we figure out a way for the mesonettes to share the raw data so that it can be used for research purposes. So there's a lot of conversation happening, I know, between the entities that are part of that Upper Missouri project. NIDIS is also providing resources to some research that's happening with the National Water Model, specifically looking at how the water model, if I'm correct, and Ed can definitely correct me because this is probably more his wheelhouse than mine, but how the water model treats soil moisture data, how it integrates it into the National Water Model. So from NIDIS's perspective, we're definitely trying to work, maybe not on the same question or the same research question, but nonetheless making sure that we're connecting the dots to all the relevant activities in the soil moisture arena.
This is Michelle. I actually wanted to ask a technical question on funding. We just recently sent a letter supporting funding for many of these programs under NOAA and NASA. And one of the most difficult things for us was trying to figure out where you guys are funded, like under what programs. There was quite a maze to get to where you guys are to connect the dots between what Congress funds and how you guys get your funding, so we can say this is what we support. Is there any way that you guys have, or anywhere that you guys have, I guess, a chart that shows how your programs are funded, so that we can show that information and say, here, Congress, if you fund this program at this amount, this is how it impacts us in the West and our water issues. So whether it's SNOTEL or NIDIS or any of those things, is there anything that exists that can help us connect those dots?
Yeah, again, this is Viva. I definitely think Mike and Ed should talk about it as well, because we're not funded obviously in the same line. But yes, I can definitely work with Tony to make sure, that he knows how NIDIS receives its funding, so that he can share that with the membership as well as with you, Michelle. Our funding, even though NIDIS, from a public law perspective, is truly an interagency program around drought, we are housed within NOAA, and so our funding comes through NOAA. And then I can provide a flow chart to Tony that he could share with you guys that situates NIDIS within the NOAA organizational structure. So we sit within the research arm of NOAA, which is OAR, and our money comes through there, and then we get allocated those funds for expenditure.
Yeah, this is Ed. I'll chime in. So first, so Viva's absolutely right. What we're working with NIDIS cohort, our friends at the OER, Earth Systems Research Lab, is to look at the underlying performance of the simulation in the National Water Model for soil moisture. And we're doing that really to see if there's usability in terms of the relatively coarse 1 square kilometer discretization of the model, if that matches up with the observation that we see from the networks like SCAN. And if there is some complement there, then we can use that to extend, one, better calibrate the model, and that's part of some of the work we'll be doing with our next generation of the model, but also to then kind of extend as the performance is tracked where there are gauge locations in situ observations, we can then extrapolate that there's people in the adjacent simulated processes. And then as we look at predictive capabilities, then we may be able to develop things that are closer to predictions of either hitting thresholds for wilting point or other key kind of drought indicating variables. But I would say this is the infancy of that research. So there's a lot of room, there's a lot of opportunity. And the nice thing is that we have very strong collaborations with Viva's group, with our colleagues at USDA, and the academic community. To build on the question about funding, I know perhaps it wasn't specifically about the observation network like SNOTEL or SCAN, but similar to NIDIS, we're funded through NOAA. We're part of the National Weather Service, and so we have a specific call out in a couple of the different Weather Service portfolios that specifically talks about funding for the National Water Center and the National Water Model, and we, as well as the Hydrological Ensemble Forecast Service. So those three things allow us to be a little bit safeguarded in terms of our annual appropriations.
Okay. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm having trouble with this stupid computer. Yeah, you asked an interesting question about the funding, and the SNOTEL network itself is part of a congressional appropriation that's year to year and pretty level. And so we expand into the soil moisture part of that as part of the program itself that we just add into it to improve the network itself. SCAN, though, is a whole different matter. SCAN has never been a program in its own. It's never had annual funding outside of what we call initiatives. And in all honesty, it's not funded at a very high level. And that's one of the reasons that we haven't seen the expansion on it that we would like to see. But the direction that we're going with this, and one of the outcomes from the meeting in January that Viva mentioned, is that collaboration where we can utilize other both mesonets and other state offices, both with the federal agencies, to expand the SCAN network, but it would be an investment not from within NRCS, but an investment on those parts to be part of this network. And so that's one of the reasons we developed these manuals for the installation and maintenance. And so we would provide the technical assistance, but then that expansion itself would be something that those states would take on as they would like. And as you can imagine, each state is a little bit different on this, both when it comes to existing mesonets and also in the interest in expanding the soil moisture. that said, we are here to provide that technical assistance for doing that scan expansion, but the investment itself is not something that comes through Congress. It's something that each of those individual agencies, and both whether state or federal, would be invested in to be part of this network. And it doesn't have to be scan itself. It's the fact is that we have the infrastructure in place to take in the data and to provide it through our databases. And so that's one of the reasons we have that tool available, but that system doesn't have to be part of the SCAN network, but to be part of the National Soil Moisture Network. One of the things, though, that we're trying to do with the National Soil Moisture Network is to find uniformity in how we configure the stations and how we collect the data itself. So the type of sensors, the location of the sensors, the format of the information coming in. We're trying to do that in a uniform fashion so that you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges when it comes to looking at the data itself. Right now, when you have individual mesonets, when you have individual networks out there that are part of a larger network, there's a complication there when you are collecting information differently. And so we're looking for doing that in a more uniform fashion, and that's one of the reasons we want to use SCAN, because it is a national network, as a model for doing this. But there's two pieces to this too, and I'm certainly, my focus is on the data collection side of it, but really the tool that NIDIS and the National Soil Moisture Network is focusing on, well, and I think Ed alluded to this, is the need for really the research side of it. So you got the data coming in, and we'll expand that, and that's a critical piece of it. But it's really the development of the tools and products that you utilize this information for that makes it essential, especially for drought mitigation and so many other purposes. The idea of having graphical representation where we can look at maps, whether on the state level or on the national level, and utilize the information, both the in situ networks that I'm talking about, but also with remote sensing, to have products and tools that show conditions in real time, what's going on with soil moisture across the country, and then develop other tools, not just to see what's going on with soil moisture, but how do we use this information? And so that's really the phase that really needs the investment. And if I was thinking if there was going to be a national investment, it's that piece of it that really needs to move forward, the research component of it, and where we make this a useful tool for those that are investing in this to get out of it what they need.
Great, thanks, you guys. Okay, I have a chat that has come in. The question is, or it states here, at a national drought forum held last year, a representative from John Deere indicated that they had thousands of soil moisture deployed nationwide. Has any effort been initiated to reach out to them to inquire about a public-private partnership opportunity?
Yes, this is Viva again. The short answer is no, not to my knowledge. However, I know that one of the primary recommendations or priorities that came out of the strategy document that is currently making its way through the clearance process is that we do a more proactive job at engaging the private sector, and specifically the John Deere representative comments were pretty much the motivating factor for that. So the short answer is no, we have not yet. And then the longer answer is, but they're on the list for us to start engaging now that we've wrapped up the process of developing the strategy. I don't know who asked the question, but it sounds like this person, that you're very interested in this, and so I'd love to maybe talk with you offline and see if you've got some thoughts, or maybe you have a relationship with somebody within John Deere that we could approach.
Viva, it was a gentleman named Ben Pratt who asked that question.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
And just as a follow-up on that, one of the concerns that there is, and we really do want to engage with private industry, not just with John Deere, but there's many companies that have soil moisture networks out there. One of the difficulties with this is that the privacy issue, that a lot of the times these are located on farms that do not want to be located with information that's going out as public information. As a federal agency, everything that I do, everything that my agency puts out, through at least through the SCAN network and the information that we collect, is public access. I mean, we don't limit that, and so there's always that trade-off of the privacy aspect of it for many of the data collections that are in there that are from the industry versus what we do in government, and government being public access has a different model on that, but it's not something we can't work out. It's just something that has been a hurdle for us to get past.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, I have another question here. This one's from Sue Lowry. It's for Viva. She asks, could you talk a bit more about the national theme topics identified from across the DOs? Were there others beyond the ones you mentioned? Could you speak to the coordination of these themes and other topics among and across the various DOs? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sue. No other themes are coming up right now in my mind. So I'll just back up and say one more thing that will provide folks some context. Each one of the 9 drought early warning systems that are on the map, each one of them has its own strategic action plan. And those plans were developed with the stakeholders through many conversations, meetings, consultative processes. And those are 2 to 3 year action plans. And in that process, the stakeholders and the partners define top 3 to 5 priorities that region wants to focus on related to drought early warning, and drought resilience. And so the themes that I showcased in this presentation by far were the ones that appeared in almost every one of those 9 strategic action plans. This idea of elevating and being more efficient with the resources, not just the fiscal resources, but also the human resources that we have, and elevating those common themes or common priorities to a more national approach is something relatively new. So the ones that I showcased today are the first out of the gate. All of the regions are going through updates to their strategic action plans, so we anticipate that there may be 1 or 2 additional ones that will be coming up on the horizon. But there is a ton of detail associated with each one of those themed areas, and could definitely spend a little bit of time with you, Sue, offline. If you wanted me, I could kind of give you a little bit more detail about each one, or maybe you've got some ideas. One of the ones that didn't show up there that actually I just thought of is the idea of ecological drought. The need to understand how to better manage resources in a way that optimizes water for multiple uses, and also to help states that have strong in-stream flow programs to help them maybe develop more valuable triggers and indicators for when those stream flows are going into low flow conditions and when they trigger certain activities within the state's water management scheme. So I would say that another one that wasn't in my slide deck is going to be ecological drought.
Great, thanks, Viva. I have another kind of a comment question coming in from a Matt. I believe his last name is Unruh. It says, Ben, I agree with your thoughts, but have the same question on privacy that Michael just mentioned. It would be helpful to see if there were any soil moisture network holes that partners could potentially work collectively together to help fill. And then Ben Pratt comes in and says, I agree. I like to think we SRBC CO.
Yeah, this is Ben Pratt with SRBC. Sorry, I was typing and I hit send before I could finish. But anyway, I was just making the point that in the Mid-Atlantic region, I mean, obviously soil moisture is as it is many places. It's a big hole in you know, our capability to predict drought. So you know, if there's any opportunity for us to plug in there and we're able to do it, you know, I think we'd be willing to consider that. It's just right now with the times we're living in and uncertain budgets, it's hard to say what that could be. But would certainly, Viva, I'll follow up with you too on that. When that comment was made at the National Drought Forum, it definitely piqued my interest. So I am glad to hear that that it, you know, at least caught the ear of, you know, of you all and made its way into the you know, the strategy moving forward. So.
Yeah, and thanks so much, and I look forward to catching up with you afterwards. I know that I agree with you. This issue of fiscal resources is one of the largest barriers to growing the network, the number of sites that we have. And I'm interested in having some conversations about where there could be some leveraging or some kind of unique agreements that are made whereby maybe the initial installation investment is made by one partner and the O&M is made by another. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at this. And then also, what's the role of citizen science in gathering more soil moisture data as well? So yeah, would love to have a conversation with you.
Thanks.
Great. So I'm not seeing any additional questions coming in. Tony?
I just want to thank you and Viva and Ed and Mike for participating. I thought it went really well, a lot of great information. So thank you again. We'll see how long we have to do this of webinars.
Yep. So thanks everyone for joining, and I'd like to thank Viva, Ed, and Mike, myself. Thank you.
Everybody stay safe. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.